I plan to replace the computer entirely, but until I do so, I will be using my 2500K with this graphic card I just bought, and this brought me to this video, like for those guys who want to buy some super graphics card but they still using some old system, what can they actually expect? And I will run same tests with this better processor and we'll see the difference. My cat doesn't want to go away. This computer is very old, it's like 8 to 9 years old, and the processor is Intel 2500K. Is it even remotely smart to buy something like this? Getting out. Whoa! And the graphics card itself turns out to be very heavy. This graphics card that I used until now uses 2 slots. And even for 2 slots, I had to cut my case. For 3 slots, I will need to cut one more. Back in the day, the cards were 1 slot, they were small, and the games were so good, everybody was satisfied. Now we have these huge cards, but you know, they don't make those good games anymore. GTX 970 and GTX 2080 Super. Of course, this one's bigger, much bigger. See? It's huge. That's the way we'll have to do it. The cable management sucks, guys, I know, but this is a temporary solution, so that should work. I just need this thing to run. Let's try it.
It's alive! Oh, it's alive!
Awesome. I will use my camera for this because I cannot record directly from the screen by some software. My processor can barely handle the game. And let's see if the game is going to be playable with this graphics card with my old processor. Before it wasn't playable at all. Let's check the settings. I've got 4K 120Hz, everything on ultra high. Good. Okay guys, so I deployed. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. As you can see, I get around 47 to 50 FPS. It is definitely playable. Yes, it is definitely playable. The map I'm trying now has 64 players at the moment, so let's try and see how many frames we may get here. It's a little bit worse. We get around 45 frames per second, but interesting thing here, look here, our GPU load is 66%, our CPU load is 100%. It definitely works, it works just fine, but you can see the bottleneck, and our CPU is 100%. Is it playable? 50 frames per second, definitely yes, I can definitely play it, but is it wise to buy this graphics card and stay in this processor? Probably not. Oh, I lost my skill to play this game. I never actually had it. The conclusion is the game is playable. I do see a huge increase in frames. I do huge increase in quality, and I do enjoy the game, and I can actually play it this way. But I want to say, if you want to buy something like this, of course, you must expect to buy a better processor later. Do not buy this graphics card and stay with it for a long time, for sure. Especially with later games, you will need that bottleneck to be covered. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the settings are 4K, 120Hz, graphics, everything in ultra. Run benchmark, yes. Same story as on Battlefield 5. 71% load on GPU and 100% on CPU. So the bottleneck is right there. So we've got 33 FPS, minimum 13, maximum 86. So let's overclock it to the maximum and let's see what actually happens, what we can achieve with this game. Right away we can see the clock. Our GPU clock is 2055, which is high, which is quite high. We overclocked it. Our memory clock, not sure if you can see it down here, it's 18,000. 33 frames general, 1933 total frames. So the difference is almost negligible. It's like used to be 1880 something, now it's 1933. Yes, we see the difference from overclocking, but the limiting factor is the CPU still The CPU usage is 100% still, so that's what you get. It's useless to overclock the card with this type of CPU. CSGO is known to be not resource centered, so it does not really want much resources from your computer, and what I think, it may actually use my GPU much better because the CPU will not be that used here in this game. So maybe it's a reasonable purchase for CSGO. Okay, I don't like this weapon, but anyway. We see the load of our CPU is 66%, so our CPU is definitely not used here. Our CPU is not used fully. Our GPU is not used as well. And the frames are 170, 150, the frames are good. It's considering the fact that this is 4K and everything is maxed out. This game is definitely playable, and the CPU is not a limiting factor. Far Cry, we got full screen 4K, everything on ultra. Let's run the benchmark. And for some strange reason my graphics overlay does not work here, so I cannot see the load, the processor load and the graphics card load, but anyway, we may check the frames we'll get in the end, and after that we'll take those frames and we'll check them with those that we get on a better processor. And we know that this benchmark is heavier than the game itself, so definitely this game will be playable. So the average FPS is 57, which is good. The next one up is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, yeah baby. The default highest preset. So the highest preset, we click OK, we click play. Our GPU usage is quite good, considering the fact that CPU is bottleneck, which is 100%, the GPU is still 99%. That is good. For some games, the CPU is a limiting factor. For some, it looks like it could be a good idea to buy this graphics card. And by the way, the CPU I'm using, 2500K, the Intel, it's overclocked, 4300 MHz, which is pretty high considering that it's 8 years old. This is pretty good and pretty high for this processor. This game is definitely playable on this CPU, I think. Cozumel, Mexico. Oh, I have actually been there. Beautiful place and gorgeous resort. The CPU load is good actually. It's not bottlenecked, it's 90, 80, 90%. Not much CPU load here, so I expect this game to run very similar on a better machine with this same graphics card. The frame rate is a little bit low, it's like 44, 42. Definitely playable, since this type of games, it's not an FPS game, you know. You can even get away with 25 to 30 frames with these types of games. It's good enough. So far this one's really playable, and I think I will play this game for a while now. So the final result that we've got is 53 FPS, frames rendered 8313. The thing with PUBG is I tried to play it on my previous card like GTX 970, but it was not playable. It was terrible. It was so bad. I mean, it was like 24 frames on 4K, and I lowered all the graphics settings to like low. Everything was low except the resolution. The resolution stayed 4K, but it was like 22 frames, 25 frames, not playable. Terrible. Now, well, now it's, what do we see? It's 60, 70, 60, 50. It's variable. It's variable, but, well, it is playable. It is playable, I can play it. And the settings are the highest, it's ultra. Everything is ultra, so... I mean, it's good. It's not the best possible way to play this game, but it's okay. We definitely can play it. Well, let's try and move to the map. I mean, it's 60 frames, 50 with dips. It's okay, I mean, I can play it. But to say the truth, I tried it previously and I did encounter lots of freezes. So lots of freezes were there, and that is annoying. I mean, the frame rate is smooth, it's fine, but those freezes, those weren't good. Yeah, definitely playable. I mean, before it was terrible, it was 25, 22 frames, now it's 60, 50. So if not for the freezes, I would say this one's 100% good, but One thing I'm not even sure, like after I upgrade the CPU, there's no guarantee those freezes won't go away, so maybe that's just the game. Who knows? I don't see those now. And PUBG is known to be not optimized. I mean, this game, the graphics quality is just not what the requirements are. I mean, the system requirements are, you know, so high. But the graphics quality is mediocre, actually. It's okay, but nothing special. Okay, I just need some weapon, come on. And that's the way it is, so no transport and you have to waste lots of time. But that's the game, yeah, right? That's why people like this game. Give this feeling of survival. The frame rate is playable. I can definitely enjoy this game. Nice transport. I wish the frame rate was higher, but even 60 is fine. It's not like CSGO. I wonder whether I could take that one. I mean, this one is good as well. Made so much noise, probably everybody knows I'm here. So I'm trying to find somebody, and now I can actually feel those freezes. Where are those noises coming from? It should be here on top, probably. Find that guy. Somebody here, I know it. Exactly. At least I've killed somebody today, that's good. But I do feel some noises. Yep, I felt those noises. And my reflexes were good. You can play this game, for sure. Decent FPS, 60. I did get those freezes, those are nasty, but at least this time the game didn't crash, so that's fine. But yeah, playable. The verdict is playable. Now finally I have all the components, now we can get back to work. The 2080 Super, it's so weird, I mean Super, come on, is it 90s or what? But anyway, I like the font. The font is sexy actually. The master case H-Founder M, which is the cooler master, really optimized for airflow. Wow, nice. I see my cat had a really good time here. 2 NVMe drives, a Western Digital 6TB black, just for some long-term storage. 2 Royals. These Royals are awesome. Chromex black cooler. I haven't bought any liquid cooling. I just don't like the liquid cooling. I don't like the maintenance of it. So this one's supposed to be really good for this processor, which is the Ryzen 9, of course. Ryzen 9 3950X. Power supply, which is the Seasonic, of course, the Seasonic Prime Platinum 1000 watts. Thermal paste, which is the Cryonaut, like the standard best thermal paste you can get, the standard one, not the liquid metal or something. X570 Oris Extreme motherboard. Looks impressive, I must admit. So a simple setup here, guys, nothing special. I do hope those tests to get a little bit better, especially with this processor here. Cheers. Noctua, they also provide this logo, and it's actually iron. When I'm using my master case, I may use my Noctua logo here. Sweet. So we have replaced the processor with our 16-core one, and right away we don't see much difference in frame rates because it's about 50 FPS. It used to be 40 to 50. It varied, but what I do see different, it's steadier. I don't see it going lower than 50 too much. It has been hovering around 40 to 50, and I believe the lows were much lower, because if you look at the 1%, 0.1% lows, it's about 47, so it doesn't really dip under it, unless we go into some really difficult situation here. Let's try it. Maybe let's use a grenade or something. Oh, I don't believe I have one. Okay. I don't really see many dips. They may appear if you go somewhere with many reflections, maybe here, but I don't see dips. So the FPS is the same. FPS is the same because it's the same GPU we are using. However, the game itself is much steadier and more enjoyable to play. And this is more or less a difficult game to play performance-wise for your PC. On our previous test it was 65% load on the GPU and it was 100% load on the CPU, so CPU was a bottleneck. Currently our CPU is 15, 20, 20% only. So it's a 16-core processor, it doesn't need that much power, of course. I do see a benefit of changing the processor. The game was relatively playable last time, but those freezes made it a little bit annoying. Right now it's steady 50 FPS. So Assassin's Creed Odyssey, if we check the CPU usage, it's about the same as Battlefield, about 20%, 25%. It jumps even up to 75%, so that's impressive for a 16-core processor. And if we check the GPU load here, you can see it 97, almost 100, so it uses all of the GPU. Right away we can see that the bottleneck from the CPU has been removed because our GPU wasn't used properly. Now GPU load is 100%, and now we get 41 FPS. So it used to be 33, now it's 41, so it's about 30% increase. Minimum is 16, used to be 13, so it's still quite low, probably due to the GPU. And maximum is 128. So Assassin's Creed shows us about 30% better result, and this CPU bottleneck was quite significant here for this game. As per the Counter-Strike, guys, now is the CS2. So the previous test has been done on the CSGO. Now is CS2 because it has been some time since I shot the last footage, and they released the new game. But let's test it in and of itself with a new processor. Let's see how it works out. So it's about, I can see 55 FPS because of the smoke. So this smoke, like, difficult to handle for the GPU. If you go back, there is no smoke, it's 90 FPS. It used to be 150, but that used to be a different game. It was the CSGO. Right now, let's probably shoot somebody now, shall we? Nah. Oh, this weapon is difficult, but yeah, we got it out 100 FPS, playable on a good processor. Sorry, this is not as informative. I cannot do a direct comparison because that game is no longer available unless I find some cracked version or something. Our CPU load is 10 to 15%, not much at all. It used to be about 65%. So it used to be 65, which told us that there is no bottleneck happening anywhere. So probably for the CSGO, CS2, I think this game is the safest one to have with the old system. If you plan to have like a good graphics card, this game doesn't seem to load up your CPU at all. So I think it's pretty safe to buy a good graphics card with an old system and keep it that way for some time at least before you update all of your system, and it should work for you. As per the Far Cry, right now we do see an on-screen overlay, so our GPU load is about 100%, which is very good. Our CPU load is 10 to 12 to 15%. In general, we see a steady 60 FPS, about 65, which is quite good. So the minimum 53, where it used to be 46. Average is 60 now, it used to be 57. And the maximum 69 used to be 69. So average 57 used to be, now it's 60, which tells us this game does not really use much of your CPU, and you can actually expect the same results. So pretty much as the CSGO, this game doesn't really use much of the CPU, which is good for those of you who want to upgrade and do not want to change the CPU. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, so it used to be 100% CPU load and 100% GPU load, which tells us that the optimization of this game is actually great. Right now it's 100% on the GPU and it's about 10 to 15% on the CPU. So it's not really using much of the CPU, however I see it jumps up to even 30, 35, maybe even more. So navigating into the game itself, we see about 50% steadily. Let's check our lows. It seems to be 50 and it seems to be very steady. I don't see any dips, but I did not see them last time as well. About 45, used to be 42, 45, now it's like 45, 50. So it seems to be very similar. Not much different. The CPU load is very low. It's about 10%, and 10% is very low. As we have seen previously, there are some games that load up this CPU, the 16-core 32-thread CPU, up to even 50%, like the Battlefield game. But yeah, this game is not really heavy on your CPU, so you might expect exactly the same results. So if we check the test result, it's average of 48 FPS and it used to be 53, so we had more frames on the bad CPU. Last time the test has been run with a slight overclock of 10%, so this change in 5 frames is actually due to that 10% overclock. In general, we definitely can say that the CPU doesn't really matter much for this game, as it's very well optimized. So you can play this game with a worse CPU and you can expect to see almost the same results. PUBG, let's navigate as quickly as possible to the bottom, and right now even in the air I see the frame rate is about 70 FPS, which will become lower once we land, as it usually does. There is more foliage, there is more trees, more objects in the screen, so all those things influence directly the frame rate you may get. Even the textures, when you're far away there are no textures. Right now you will see some. And what do we see? It's about 53, 56 frames per second, exactly the same as it used to be, so no changes. However, there is one huge difference this time. There are no freezes, which is actually very good, because in a game like this, a competitive game, when you have freezes, that is very annoying. And right now, and as I played a couple times on the CPU already, there are no freezes happening at all, which is great. And we can see our CPU usage is 28, 30. That's a lot actually, you know. 30% for this kind of CPU. May even jump up to 40. Okay, there is somebody hunting me down, but yeah, I'm not playing this game competitively right now. In general, I can definitely see a big difference. Yeah, a big difference, because those freezes were very annoying. However, the frame rate is still the same. It's still the same graphics card, which makes it somewhat playable on the bad CPU. However, I would definitely advise not to because of those freezes. And actually, interesting thing is that CPU was i5, which had 4 cores. I tried briefly to replace that CPU with i7, same architecture, same frequency, except it had 4 cores and 4 threads additionally. So it was 8 threads together, which actually made those freezes go away. So probably the core count makes a big difference here. 4 cores is not enough for this game. However, the raw frequency of the CPU is not really that important, because we see the same frame rate on the bad one, same frame rate on the good one. So this game is 50-50, somewhat playable on bad CPUs, but I would rather recommend you not to. So in general, guys, considering all of the tests that we have made today, there are some games that prefer better CPU. As expected, there are some that do not really prefer better CPU, that can do very well with something like a 10-year-old CPU and will work just fine. It depends on the game, really. So if you are in a situation where you want to buy something better regarding your GPU, you don't really have enough money for the CPU right now, or maybe not enough time to replace it, you can go ahead. I did it that way, and I stayed 1 year with a system like that. In general, it's not a deal breaker. You can definitely do it. You can wait a little and buy a better CPU later. It definitely works. Unless you use something like i3 2-core processor, in that case probably it will not work. But as long as you have something like 4-core or 4-core 8-thread old i5 i7 system, Sandy Bridge, something like that, it will definitely work. Links to the parts I'm currently using in this rig are in the video description. If you want to use those, please go ahead and do so. And as always guys, thanks for watching and stay tuned.